I'm chronically prepared. Ironically,
Indeed,
chronically. Oh, dude, I have an idea.
Does it hurt?
Are you sometimes? Are you familiar with Kevin Smith?
I am familiar with Kevin Smith,
and that he did like a recent like Jay and Silent Bob reboot. I saw it, and it was. If you're familiar with the View Askew universe, it was entertaining, but certainly not his best work. Lots of cameos and lots of like rehashes from all of his previous movies.
Kevin Smith. I was thinking Will Smith, but yes, I know who Kevin Smith is as well. Okay. I love that dude.
So, in this movie, the reboot, Jay and Silent Bob Rebooted, or whatever the hell the name of it is, the most recent film, they are supposed to be going to attend something called Chronic Con.
Chronic Con.
Yeah, and I was like, does this exist? Is this a real event? If not, let's invent one.
Yeah.
Let's have a Chronic Con. Where can we hold Chronic Con?
You can hold it at the Keen at my house. I mean, unless it gets too big, but that's a good problem to have.
Okay, so 7 years ago, I became an accidental anarchist.
Really?
Yeah, I lived outside of the state because I chose to run away at 16 years old.
Ah, okay.
And being 16, I hadn't gotten my license yet. It was literally my 16th birthday. And I was like, okay, I'm the fuck out of here. Right? I stole
Now, were you aware that that's like the first year in most states that they won't go hunt you down?
I was.
Okay, so this was planned.
Yeah, I had prepared for this for quite some time. It was premeditated all the way. My plan worked fucking flawlessly too, man. Essentially, I stole my uncle's car. But I didn't steal it from him directly. What happened is my uncle owned a bunch of cars, and he was letting my sister use that to truck people to and from school, right? Because she had a license. She was a senior. I was a freshman, right? And so, okay, well, and that got them out of having to drive kids around, right? Like, oh, you've got your license? Okay, you pick everybody up and truck them back and forth to school, right? So that's kind of what she did, and she used my uncle's car. I, having planned this well in advance, was able to snag a spare set of keys out of the cupboard where my uncle kept his spare keys, right? Because he had many vehicles. He had fleets of vehicles for reasons, business reasons. And so I was able to, one day just sort of pocket, the keys. And then I kept them. It was like a week before my birthday. And then I was also supposed to have guitar lessons on this very day. Now, mind you, I've only taken 6 actual guitar lessons. This would have been my 7th one. Right, I had only recently signed up for guitar lessons. So anyway,
do you ever regret not having that 7th lesson?
No.
Okay.
In fact, I regret having the first 6, particularly with the dawn of the internet and all that kind of. It's like, oh, I could have just, watched a video and learned what I needed to learn.
Wow. So. See, I've got an electric guitar sitting up in my room that I have never played.
Watch a YouTube video, learn tablature.
Tablature?
Tablature is just a grid that it's all of the 6 strings from top to bottom, the thickest to the thinnest. And then there's a circle with a number on it. That number represents the fret you're supposed to be on. And so, the fretboard has all of the little dots on it to mark the, 3, 5, 7, 9, 12, whatever. And so if you just look at this chart and you go, oh, you need a power chord that's on the 5th fret, the 7th fret, and the 12th fret. 5, 7, 12, 5, 7, 12. That's how you learn how to play guitar.
Okay. Interesting.
Tablature is awesome. It's for non-music readers, which I am one of.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I used to have to sit down with a book. I could read
music back in the day a little bit. I played piano and
I could read music, but I couldn't sit in front of music with a guitar and make the translation to what string and frets those were in my brain by looking at the music. I don't know. I'm a weird dude. I have a weird brain. So I couldn't put that together. So tablature was my savior. And, of course, rock and roll, right? You just distortion and then, palm muting and power chords and occasionally a little pinch harmonic in there, and you're good to go.
I'm filthy rich. I own apartment buildings and shopping malls, and I only know 3 chords.
I know more than 3, but not much.
That was stolen from a Cheech and Chong ditty. My mother tried talking to me, tell me to live, but I don't listen to her because my head is like a sieve.
So I planned this whole thing the night before. I pack, a backpack's worth of clothes, right? Whatever cash I have on hand, my guitar, of course, and I had a little briefcase-looking thing full of cassette tapes. All right, because that's how old I am, right?
Yeah,
this is pre-CD.
I had those too.
It might have been post-CD, but I wasn't rich enough to have CDs yet, so I still had cassettes, right?
Did they come from the Columbia Record and Tape Club?
Probably most of them. The rest of them came from me copying, from other people who could afford to buy the real album. So
yeah, I used to join that from time to time, and then I'd send them a letter saying, I'm 15. You can't really hold me to that contract.
there were 2 of those. There was the Columbia House, and then there was another one, and you could
CBS Record and
that's
Tape,
the other, yeah. You could play both of them. If you had multiple addresses, you were dialed in.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But at any rate, so I planned this whole thing the night before. I pack up some stuff, and I clandestinely drag it out of my bedroom window onto the roof of the garage/porch, and I climbed on off of that, and I loaded into the back of the car because the hatchback had this like covering thing on it, and nobody ever went into the hatchback of the car this whole time my sister had been driving this group of people to and from school. Right, except for when I had guitar lessons. And so we're leaving the next day to go to school, and she's like, did you bring your guitar already? I'm like, yes, I did. And she's like, oh, okay, because she didn't see me bring it out, but I was just like, yeah. And she's like, oh, okay. So we drive to school, we pick up everybody, we get to school. Her and my lockers were next to each other because, well, our last names are the same, and that's how they, make lockers in high school, right? They put your alphabetically, right? And so I had to grab my guitar out of the hatch without letting anybody see the rest of my shit, right? And so I do that, and I had to go all the way into school. I had to get to the locker, put my guitar in the locker, say goodbye to my sister and everybody else, wait for the bell to ring, and act like I was going to class. And as soon as everybody cleared the way, I walked back to my locker, grabbed my guitar, walked back to the car, tossed it in the hatchback, got in the driver's seat, and proceeded to learn how to drive.
Oh, nice.
Now, there had been times when I had maybe like reached over and like steered for somebody, or when I was a kid, like, an uncle would put me in their lap and let me steer or whatever, right? But I'd never operated the pedals. This was an automatic car, so not a whole lot there, right? You put it in gear. I knew what the gears were and all that kind of stuff. It was front-wheel drive. It was a 1984 Chevy Citation, 4-door no less, right?
Oh, no.
And so, I learned how to drive that day. I got as far as Dothan, Alabama. This is from Wisconsin, right?
D-A-U-Dothan.
Dothan.
Oh, okay.
Dothan, Alabama. This is how they talk in Dothan, Alabama.
I'll bet that is.
Thereabouts. So, he's looking up just Chevy Citation. Yep. The 4-door that I had was the red in the bottom, sort of the left one, but it was the model. Yeah, that's almost exactly it.
Wow.
Years later, I would return home, the prodigal son, if you will, and my uncle actually gave me that car. He got it back. What happened is I broke down. I got a flat tire. And being 16 and not really having much of a father all of my life, nobody taught me how to change a fucking tire.
Right.
So I didn't know what the hell to do. And so I was just like, well, I guess I'm hitchhiking the rest of the way, right? And so I did. I hitchhiked into fucking Panama City, Florida, and I became a beach bum.
Wow. And where were you coming from?
Wisconsin.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Like the Milwaukee area.
So that car had to be like towed back to Wisconsin.
Yeah. Years later, my uncle told me the story, and he was like, yeah, hello, is this, Bob, right? And my Uncle Bob. And he's like, yeah, who the hell is this, right? Because, people in Wisconsin don't talk like people in Dothan, Alabama, right? Rarely does a person in Wisconsin get a call from somebody talking like this, right? It was literally, yeah, this is Bubba from Bubba's Garage. Like, I shit you not, man. Literally Bubba from Bubba's Garage calling him, saying, yeah, we have your car here. So what I did, because I thought I was being smart, I removed the license plates. after it broke down because I didn't want to, I wanted to buy time, right?
Sure.
I'm like, if anybody's hot on my trail, I don't want them to, I want them to have to jump through hoops to figure out where this car came from. So I took the license plates off and I chucked them, like, I don't know, in a river or a creek or a drainage on the side of the freeway or something. You know what I mean? So that they, would have a harder time figuring it out. So eventually got towed to whatever municipal towing facility that was used by that area, by Dothan, Alabama. Eventually they ran the VIN number and they got a hold of my uncle. They returned the car to him. He did have to pay for the tow.
I'll bet that cost him some bucks.
It did. But then again, this is like, I'm trying to think of the year.
Yeah. Well, 16-year-olds aren't generally expected to think about consequences like that very much.
Yeah, this is like 87. No, I had one mission and one mission only, and that was to get the fuck out of Dodge, out of my current parental unit situation, and be free of all of that shit. Right? I had this insatiable desire to be free. They call this eleutheromania. Right, and eleutheromania
is what
defined
they called
as,
it when slaves had the
yes.
Slaves who insisted on escaping in the Old South were actually diagnosed with a mental disorder.
Eleutheromania.
Okay, it was that
I don't know if
disorder
it's the same one, but it sure sounds like it. Eleutheromania is defined as the irrepressible, insatiable desire for freedom.
Wow, I'm definitely I don't want to say sufferer. I don't think I suffer from it. I think I benefit from it. But
I do too.
I've got it.
Well, and like, we talk a lot, in the freedom crowd, or at least around these parts with you guys about, making your own choices and then emancipation, right? I was more than capable well before 16 of taking better care of myself than was being taken care of by the people I was living with. You know what I mean?
Right.
I was more than capable of doing so.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that where it seems like, I know kids that I knew in Keene where the kids seem infinitely more competent than their parents when I've met them, Yeah. It's an interesting phenomena.
Don't get me wrong, I have love for my family. There was absolutely no understanding coming from them towards me, and I don't really blame them at this point. I just realized that they had no idea what they were dealing with. I was such a unique individual for that particular family, right? That they were just like, we've never experienced anybody like this before, right?
Yeah, I was adopted, and I had a similar experience where, my family is very not conservative. They're liberal, but they're very cautious. They tend to, very carefully do the right thing from society's point of view. And I'm just like, society, fuck them. They're dumbasses.
Right. So being 16 years old and not knowing what the hell I was doing, like legally, right? I didn't study the law or anything. I just was like, whatever happens, I'll be better off because I can make better decisions than the folks supposedly taking care of me can make for me. And so I didn't know that you needed things like identification or a social security number to get a job. I thought you just went into a place that said now hiring. You're like, yeah, I'd like a job. And they go, okay. I didn't know what it took to get a job.
That's how it works in the movies.
Yeah, well, so that's not how it works. Anybody who's listening, that's not how it works if you're, under, 15 or something. That's not how the world works. But at least at this point in space and time, there were alternatives. And for example, I worked as a carny for a while.
I did that.
I was both an agent
which
and a ride
which
junk.
carnival did you work for?
I worked for a whole bunch of them, but the one that I remember the most is Myers International Midways.
Okay. I worked for one called C&D Shows out of Florida. We called them Crud and Dirt. And then I worked for another one called Wade shows. I don't know where
Wade,
they hailed from.
Wade
they picked
Midways.
me up. So you actually know these companies? My
I'm
God.
familiar with some of them, yes.
One of them picked me up. I had decided to drive to a AA convention in Salt Lake City from Ann Arbor, Michigan, leaving without any money.
Around an AA convention.
Yeah, and I was proof that if you sobered up a horse thief, you got a sober horse thief. Because it was me, under 20 me, and a couple of my under 20 friends, and we drove down there with no money. And the plan was we would just stop before we crossed the state line, do a dine and dash, do a gas run, and then get one toke over the line, and they couldn't pursue us back in those days.
Yeah.
So the cam breaks on the car, and I wake up behind this transmission shop in Green Rock, Illinois, going, what the fuck are we gonna do with my two friends? They actually let us sleep in the car behind the transmission shop, and they were setting up. I think that was C&D shows in the field behind the transmission shop, and we were just like, jobs were saved. But just to interject, I hope you can return to your story. I haven't drawn you off track.
I'm sure. No, not at all. And even if you did, it wouldn't be very difficult for me to go, where did I leave off, man?
You left off your uncle.
I stole the
gotten
car.
down to Florida. You couldn't
Florida.
get you got a job with the carnival.
Oh yeah,
because you didn't have any fucking
No, that's not the first
ID.
job that I got though. The first job that I got. So at first, because I ran out of money, I actually befriended a waitress at the Waffle House. Those of you from the South know what a Waffle House is. Covered, smothered. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Did she cover and smother you?
I also ordered some hash browns while I was there. Yeah,
not shaved, eh?
At any rate, I ended up sort of staying with her and like 4 other people in this like 3-bedroom roach trailer. Right. And I mean roach trailer. Like it was like roach infested to the point where like if you woke up in the middle of the night and you walked into the kitchen and you flicked on the light, the entire counter would be covered with roaches and they would all scatter to God knows where because they knew how to get behind all the cracks of every fucking thing.
And just to be clear, this was a trailer in Alabama?
No, Panama City,
Panama
Florida,
City, okay.
Which southern Alabama. Yeah. You know, I mean.
Panama City is where in Florida?
Panhandle.
In the Panhandle.
It's,
okay. So that's southern Florida.
It's east of Pensacola.
Yeah. Well, I see. I called the area around the interior. I called the interior of Florida southern Florida because it was part of the South. But then I called the ring around the outside of Florida northern Florida because it was occupied entirely by New Yorkers.
We've got a third voice now.
Your geography's off a little bit. Panama City is a beach town.
It is.
Oh, it is a beach town.
So it's a coastal.
There's Panama City and then Panama
so it's
City
northern
Beach.
Florida.
It's northern Florida for sure. In the Panhandle, it's just
but southern Alabama and Georgia.
It's maybe 20 minutes east of Pensacola.
Okay.
Right by car. So I call it southern Alabama. Now I had a really good time in Panama City Beach and Panama City. I met some really awesome people. I had some killer times. I got laid like a motherfucker. I mean, like it just sort of came to me. It was amazing. I can't describe it enough in a good enough way to tell you that, like, it was an insanely awesome time. I was like, I have been to the promised land, and it is Panama City Beach when you are 16 years old during spring break.
I think the promised land is just being 16 years old during spring break. You know, although some places are surely better than others for that.
Don't call me Shirley.
Well, my mother's name was Shirley.
I slept on the beach frequently because you could. Right? Like, you know, I mean, I remember a quote. I don't remember who said it, but they said hotels are a racket because the human body can and will sleep anywhere.
If it gets tired enough, yeah.
Panama City Beach at the time had freshwater showers every mile or 2 miles or something, near the piers and that kind of a thing. So if you did end up sleeping on the beach and you needed a shower, you could just go take it. It wasn't hot. it was cold. But they put those there for people who went swimming in the saltwater ocean.
Sure.
So when they got out, they could rinse themselves off because that's what you do.
Yeah, nearly all public beaches in saltwater areas have that.
Right.
Yep, I encountered it in Mexico, all over the place.
So then I discovered that you could collect cans for money.
Yeah, I did that when I was a kid.
And I was like, wait a minute. There are literally thousands of people partying and hundreds and thousands and maybe even millions of cans being just tossed about in the openly accessible trash cans of hallways of all of these hotels.
Was it a nickel or a dime?
It was, it was by the pound at this point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it wasn't like Michigan where they got the 5.10.
Yeah, I was in Michigan.
Yeah.
It was a dime a piece. And when Michigan would have a football game, the homeless partied. and I with them because that's where I was chilling when I was 16.
Right. Did you have the returnable bottles too?
Yeah, they were returnable. Every store had to take them back. And we were bad. There was one store that they kept the bottles downstairs, and there was a back door that they sometimes left unlocked. So we would find that unlocked, and we'd jack bags of cans out from the back of the store, and then go to another store and return them. Which I feel badly about that now, but the guy who ran it is long dead. So sorry, Fred Cry, wherever you are.
My friend Joey's older brother Matt, we would get cases of Ham's beer. Right, in the bottles, right? And they used to have these like super heavy-duty cardboard boxes that they would put these 24 bottles of beer in, and you would go in and you'd pay whatever, and there was like $1.50 or $2 deposit on the thing, right? And so you would just go and buy as many of these things as you could, and we would obviously get older people to do this for us, but we would keep them in either Joey or Matt's fucking room at their house. And Matt was smart. He made furniture out of these things. Right, so you'd get 3 or 4 of them, stack them up, put a little piece of cloth over it. Yep, that's my end table. That's my coffee table. This kind of thing.
Michigan had Joe Bells for the same purpose.
Nice. And so you would get broke enough, but it was like the weekend and you wanted to get drunk with your bros, that was, okay, start taking the cloths out of everything. Okay, let's destroy the coffee table. We're taking all these returnables back, and we're getting our $1.50 or $2 per, back, and we're using that to buy more beer.
Right, of course.
We were budget-conscious drinkers.
Wow. We got a lot of commonality in our backstories.
Yeah. Well, I think the Midwest thing, that's a clincher.
And you're from Wisconsin?
Yeah.
I actually ran away in Wisconsin, too.
I ran away from Wisconsin. Not necessarily from Wisconsin. Like, I kind of like Wisconsin. It's all right. But it was the family situation that I was leaving.
See, I was in a military academy in a little town called Delafield, Wisconsin, right outside Oconomowoc.
Yeah.
And
most commonly mispronounced as Oconomowoc.
Yeah. And we used to, they had at the time these bumper stickers that were meant to promote tourism in Wisconsin that said "Escape to Wisconsin."
Yeah, that was
and we would cut the 2 out, so and stick them on our foot lockers, so it just said "Escape Wisconsin."
Nice. That's fantastic.
But yeah, I got arrested as I'm trying to hitchhike away from this military academy after midnight one Saturday night.
You were in a military academy?
Yeah, made me the man I am today.
I find that
I always want to go back to their alumni day and let them parents know. Them parents know that I would not be the man that I am if it wasn't for St. John Military Academy.
Was this some sort of punishment? Did you do something wrong? And all right, you're going to the military academy.
Actually, I tried to kill myself when I was 13.
Okay.
And so I spent several months in a psychiatric hospital called the Northwestern Memorial Hospital Institute of Psychiatry in downtown Chicago.
Good, but they could use a few more words in that title.
I'm curious, did you try to kill yourself before or after you met the older woman?
It was actually after. And the reason behind it was her husband found out that we were seeing each other, her ex-husband.
Does this mean at 13 you were a motherfucker?
I was a motherfucker. Nice. I was a motherfucker from the time I learned to fuck. I lost my virginity to a mother. And let me introduce you to the brothers in the band, each and every one of whom is a bad mother in his own right, with apologies to Robin Williams. But yeah, so anyway, her husband found out that she was seeing me. Ironically enough, was one of my father's students in graduate school. He was a pharmacist, and your
dad was a drug dealer?
Yes, my dad was a drug dealer, and her ex-husband was a drug dealer.
I mean, a legal pharmacist, right? Yeah.
But yeah, I actually said that to my dad one time in a drunken rage that, well, I'm following in your footsteps, Dad, because we both sell drugs.
I learned it from watching you.
Oh God,
I learned it from watching you.
Except he never was in the retail, and he was a researcher, and he was also the dean of pharmacy. So he was a academic.
Dean of pharmacy?
The dean of pharmacy is the guy at the College of Pharmacy he's like the principal. A dean is like a principal of a college. The university.
I mean, I know what a dean of a school is. I just don't know how do you apply that to drugs.
Well, the College of Pharmacy is a school within the University of Michigan.
Okay.
So the university had a president, but each of the colleges, like engineering, pharmacy, LS&A, which is literature, science, and the arts. Each of those sub schools had a dean.
Okay.
But his other claim to fame was that he went down and lived with an Indian tribe on the Yucatan Peninsula, and this was a tribe so insular that he spoke Spanish. And still does speak Spanish. He's still living. His career is in the past tense, but the man goes on.
Understood.
And so he went down and lived with these Indians on the Yucatan Peninsula, complete with Spanish to Indian, possibly Inca dialect translators, and came back to introduce the Western world or Northern world, maybe, I don't know, to a drug called salvia, which they used for ceremonial purposes. And that, as far as I know, is the first detailed study of salvia to appear in
Were we
Western
talking about salvia recently?
literature.
Okay.
I actually haven't. I've never done salvia. And the reason is I'm scared of this shit because I've seen people do some not just think or say irrational shit, which doesn't scare me.
Much like LSD, where you want somebody you trust to be around for your first trip, right?
Well,
salvia, you kind of want the same thing to do, but here's the kicker: it ends in like 12 minutes.
Right, but then again, a sufficiently deranged man can do a whole shitload of damage in 12 minutes.
That's true. Yes.
And the thing is, like DMT, you blast off much more in terms of your level of separation
or like
from
PCP
reality.
or something.
But the nice thing about a DMT trip is your body is smart enough to just shut up and sit there until your mind comes back, and that's not necessarily the most movement
your body's like, hey brain,
yeah,
we're not going anywhere.
And that's the thing. Be sure that you have your body in park before putting the trip in gear.
So in your own way, did you also become the dean of drugs?
Well, I did have a customer named what the fuck was his name?
Bob?
George? Loved that kid.
Greg?
No,
Ross? I'm just throwing random names out.
Yeah, that's not going to help.
I know.
Anyway, one of the local kids who moved here used to call me the Prince of Pot.
Oh, I see.
It was God damn.
That also spells pop for you acronomicons out there. That's the evil book of acronyms.
Puff was his name. Yeah.
Was he the magic dragon?
He was not the magic dragon.
Did he live by the sea?
He did not live by the sea.
I don't know. Where did his name come from?
Because he liked to puff and then he liked to pass.
Oh, okay. That seems reasonable.
Well, nobody really likes to pass. But
Nobody really likes to pass?
but he generally would.
Does nobody pass the duchy on the left-hand side?
Well, nobody tries to make a rule of that. Pass a joint to the left and pass a pipe to the right. But they don't teach these kids today anything in school. So you can't. If you're with a bunch of left people or a bunch of young people, you're lucky if it gets back around to you at all. So I don't make a big deal about the side. But old people, I'll be like, hey, that's a duchy. We should be passing it on the left-hand side.
So I just want to close up the whole like accidental anarchist thing.
Oh yes.
I worked these like weird jobs that nobody would ever get, right? I was a commercial fisherman. I longline fished for swordfish, shark, and tuna fish. For 3 trips, whatever you call that. If you've ever seen The Deadliest Catch or the movie Perfect Storm, I experienced all of that.
You died in a storm?
No, I didn't die in the storm.
Okay.
But I experienced like 60 foot seas in like a 60-foot boat.
Jesus.
So like
you realize that that's a fucking stupid idea.
Well, and so what really got me is that it was my turn for wheel watch, and you're watching this radar thing, and I seen this like half moon thing come over the top, and it's getting bigger. And so the idea was that, if you saw anything like that, you go wake up the boat captain, right? Not to be confused with me, the captain.
Okay.
The boat captain.
Did that ever confuse people? That people heard you saying captain to you?
I hadn't yet earned the captain moniker at this point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So at any rate, so I see this thing, and I go and I wake up the boat captain, and he comes out and he goes, "Go wake everybody else up. We gotta batten down the hatch," or whatever. He said something that reminded me of batten down the hatches. And so I go wake everybody up, and it's a total emergency. We have to haul everything in from the sides. We have to strap everything down, lock everything down, this kind of thing. We have to get into our slicker suits and stuff. And like
was the captain's mother-in-law coming?
I think she was just reasonably excited. I don't think she was coming.
Okay. But things are starting to shake on the boat.
It was hard to tell through her hairy bush.
Yes.
That was her other son, Harry Bush. No,
Harry Bush, okay.
So I wake up the captain.
Kind of like if George Bush and Harry Brown had a beautiful love child.
Kind of, yeah. So
God, that's grotesque.
So I wake up the captain, and he says, "Please bring me that wine." And I said, "We haven't had that spirit here since 1969.
Okay.
That's not what happened.
But in the master's chamber, when you gathered for the feast, and you stabbed it with your steely knives, did you manage to kill the beast?
We did, actually, when it came to shark. And that's a whole other story. I'll tell you about fishing for shark
soon to replace
time.
The mud shark in your mythology.
I experienced so like this big ass storm comes on, and Richie says batten down everything. That Richie was the captain, by the way. And so all the there's only like 6 people on this boat, right? So we all gather, strap everything down, lock everything down, and we all gather in the wheelhouse. And the captain goes, "So here's what you do in these situations, guys. The storm is moving too fast. We don't have enough power or fuel to outrun it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to turn into it."
Oh.
So here comes this giant, massive storm, and this is like a sailor's thing. This is seasoned sailors are like, "Yep, that's what you do."
And
sailors who aren't seasoned are like, "What the fuck? You're gonna do what? You don't turn into a storm? What the fuck is wrong with you?"
Because basically, given the physics of the boat, if you turn into the storm, you're a lot less likely to capsize.
Right.
But if you're cutting through a wave, it's going to look like you're one of the Israelites passing through the trench in the middle of the Red Sea, because you're going to go deep into that wave. There's not very much to support you at the top of it.
Yeah, you would have to floor the gas climbing up the wave as it came towards you. The waves, of course, would cap at the top of them, so the entire boat would be submerged in water. You hoped that you came out the other end and you gave it enough gas.
Now, where were you when this happened? Were you below deck, or were you on
We were
board?
all in the wheelhouse. Everybody
You were
gathered,
all in the fucking wheelhouse.
all in the wheelhouse.
So you were watching this happen in real time.
I was-
Was the wheelhouse watertight?
Ish.
Oh,
I was
gross.
convinced I was going to die while this was going on. It was
Yeah.
like literally. You've been on a roller coaster, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so imagine the scariest fucking roller coaster you've ever been on, and then narrow that down to just the scariest part of that roller coaster that you've ever been on, and then multiply that by like several hundred times repeatedly. Because that's what it was like in this boat. We would like head into a wave, climb the wave, floor the gas, right? The cap would rush the wheelhouse, water would get in and then sort of drain out. You know, we'd get to the top of the wave, we'd sit at the top of the wave, and while you were at the top of the wave in the storm, if you looked left or looked right, you could see like all the other boats also trying to navigate, you know, not all, but like several at least. And like the bigger the boat, the more difficult time. Like you could see like, I don't know what kind of boat it was, but it was much longer than ours. And like half of it was like sticking out of the top of the crest of the wave, waiting to like slam down and ride the top of the wave before it went down the other side at incredible breakneck speeds and shit, man.
And of course, the other danger there is if you hit it just wrong, the boat can break.
Yeah.
Like a broken canoe, and then you're fucked.
And on the way down the other side, there's no brakes on a boat. You can't like really like sort of slow your decline. You just have to sort of go with it, let off the gas, and just sort of ride down the other side of the fucking wave. And then the nose of the boat obviously dips right into the fucking water, and you just have to wait for physics to kick in to bring you up out of that fucking water, and then repeat. As soon as you come up out of that water, floor it and drive up the next fucking wave.
For how many hours?
I don't know. I mean, it seemed like forever, which means it was probably like 15 minutes. But, I mean, it may have been hours. I don't know. I don't recall the duration of the time. I remember being very fucking glad when we saw, like, the ray of sunshine at the end of the thing when we were coming out of, like, the last big-ass fucking wave. It was really weird, too, because, like, when these storms end, they just sort of end. Right? There is a beginning and an end to these things in the sea, in the ocean. We were in the Gulf of Mexico, Campeche Bay specifically, when this occurred. And, like, it's just like, oh, it's over now. It's like the squall has gone, and the water just sort of turns calm, right? And then, you know, all the dark clouds pass, and the sun comes out, and you're like, ah.
Yeah. Well, shit like that, generally on land, it'll get caught on mountains, as I understand it. And so it'll stop its motion and just sink where it is. But, of course, there isn't any of that stuff on the ocean. So, you know, the storms have to move on.
I don't have a good perception of time on that particular excursion. It was one of the I mean, I've come close to death a number of times in my life. Not because I'm necessarily a thrill seeker, right? If I were, I'd have gone skydiving by now. That's kind of on my bucket list. I don't know why. I just feel like jumping out of a perfectly good airplane for no apparent reason seems like fun.
Yeah, it was on my bucket list. I'm 50 now, and I'm thinking I might cross that one off.
Yeah,
because the
I've been
thing
thinking
is,
the same thing.
I don't heal like I used to.
I did bungee
Dying
jump once.
doesn't scare me. You know, being broken for a long time scares the hell out of me.
Did you bungee jump?
I have bungee jumped.
I bungee jumped once, and I got to tell you, that was maybe the second scariest to like almost dying on the fishing boat, right? Yeah. Like, oh, that ground is coming up to my face awfully quick.
Yeah. Well,
whoa!
Statistically, I don't know where Florida fishing is, but I know that the most dangerous job in America is lobster fishing.
Yeah, because they use the fucking big old crates
in Alaska.
And shit. Yeah.
Because they do it in cold water, so you got the Titanic effect going if you go in.
I'm a spoiled commercial fisherman. I only did it in the Gulf of Mexico, where it was. I remember making a collect call to like some relatives on like Christmas Eve or something from the boat, which had to route through Panama. Not Panama City, Panama.
Oh, wow.
Right? And so they accepted the charges. They got the hugest phone bill they've ever had. They accepted a collect call, a ship-to-shore collect call through Panama. And so I could say Merry Christmas to some people. That was pretty cool.
Wow.
It wasn't the family that I was trying to get away from. So. At any rate, so yeah, I did all these like weird things, these under-the-table gigs, these bastions of, I don't know, like there were obviously like a lot of felons that are fishermen and carnies and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. People who would otherwise not really want to be found, right? Or they don't want their income to be known. Lots of people collecting maybe some sort of disability or retirement or pension of some sort, but it's not enough to get by.
Yeah, you're not that disabled if you're working as a fucking carny, because that's one of the hardest jobs I ever did.
But also, if they make any money at all, they take that shit away from them, and that's not enough to live on, right?
Right.
So, like, if they are disabled, but, like, they're not given enough to live on, they have to find another way. And so there was a bunch of that as well, right? Like people who, don't look disabled but were disabled, One of the guys I met was a Vietnam veteran who only had one lung, right? Because he got shot, right? He got shot twice, once in the lung, once in the head, and the shot to the head gave him grand mal seizures, epilepsy, for life.
Oh, wow.
And so he was getting, I don't know, $300 a month or something, for his pension. But, like, that wasn't enough for him and his wife to live on. You know what I mean? And so, they both worked the carnival, when they could. It was seasonal for them. They would make enough money, and then they would, quote, winter out, unquote, right, when the season was over. And they'd just go, Florida or somewhere, join the snowbirds and, rent some cheap place or whatever. And that's kind of, their cycle of life. It was an interesting subculture, too, the carnival is. They have their own terminology for money. They have, like, the 5 is the fin, the 10 is the sawbuck, the 20...
Which goes all the way back to vaudeville,
It does, yeah. The 20 is the double. They call people marks, right? People who are going to try and spend money in the games, they're marks. And that goes back to the gypsies, right? The gypsies... the word mark in this context originated from the gypsies when they would have an open market. And what would happen is somebody, would eventually show up who was like, I have a lot of money. I want everybody to know it, right? They'd start tipping well and spending, money places. And so somebody would dip their hand in some chalk and just sort of pat the guy on the back as he walked away from having spent a bunch of money at their place to let everybody else know that this guy has a fat wad of cash in his pocket, basically, right? And so that's where the term mark comes from.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, lots of... They have this thing called a rube, right? A rube is just something that they yell if one of the carnies is in trouble. It's kind of like cell 411 in a way, but it's without the cell phone. It's just something. And so what happens if somebody yells a rube, everybody grabs whatever they have nearby them that might be construed as a weapon and runs towards the a rube. You don't want a false a rube.
And
let me tell you.
And that would happen from time to time because there were the carnival was where I formed my Rich's first rule of feminine behavior, which is women like men who aren't going to be in town very long.
I can totally, absolutely confirm that 100%. I never got laid so much as I did when I worked the carnival.
And the thing is, a lot of this was dissatisfied girls with boyfriends. So sometimes the boyfriends would find out about this, and the next thing you know, he and a bunch of his friends are trying to bust up the carnival.
Oh,
that I think was the most common reason.
Yeah.
But there were, I mean,
some of these girls were just like
with the townies in probably 3 of the 7 towns we played.
Yeah, you had to be careful.
Well, if you're gonna be stupid, you got to be tough. But important.
I mean, in the defense of some of these girls, they were like, some of them were like, I've been with the same guy my whole life, never had another guy. Okay, come on over. I'll be gone in 2 days. It's fine. The weird thing is when you have a girl follow you from town to town, like going well out of hundreds of miles to be with,
your first groupie,
stalker-ish. Yeah. I mean, I do. I'm like, I'm on tour and she's like, I don't know I don't remember. All I remember is I'm like, this is the 3rd town that she's come to. I'm several hundred miles away from the first town I met her. She went and found somebody who knows where I sleep, and they were like, oh, yeah, it's right over there. Just volunteered where, and then she showed up. And, I mean, fortunately, or I don't know how you look at it, I wasn't with somebody else at the time. You know what I mean? Like that moment, that day where she decided to show up or whatever. But I was like, really? Hundreds of miles? But I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm, I don't know. I don't claim to be, any Superman in bed or anything like that, but like I think it's just the result of, somebody being overzealous, right? The stalker effect.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when you get your first one of those, you're like, oh fuck, I didn't realize this could be a problem.
Yeah, that happens from time to time. Hasn't happened to me in a long time, but
I also sold sunglasses on the beach for cash.
Nice.
Right, like it was a cash only thing. There was like this little cart kind of thing with an umbrella, so I didn't get sunburnt. And of course, I could just wear whatever shades were on the cart, right? So I had free sunglasses, and then like I would get 15% of whatever I sold in the day. Right, so it was a commission-only job. So if I didn't sell shit, I didn't get shit. But if I had a great day, I'd get a bunch of cash, and that was great. I didn't need any ID for that job. The boss was killer, So, but these are all jobs that exist outside of the government.
Right.
Completely, 100%. There is no bureaucratic tracing of any of these jobs that I've had. Right, you can't query some database from 1989 or 88 and be like, how many commercial, blah blah blah, was the average pay of a guy selling sunglasses on the beach in Panama City? None of this data exists. There's no trace of any of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to do this because I was without the papers. Right? Everybody makes fun of like, yo, papers, please, right? Because of the Nazi meme, right? But like, you literally can't do anything legit, like above board, right? And carnies have a name for this. They call it a straight job.
Right.
Right? Like if you have a regular job in an office or a grocery store or gas station or restaurant or something like that, that's what they call a straight job. Right? Like all the other jobs that are outside of the system are not straight jobs. They're real jobs in their culture.
Yeah. Or just jobs.
Or just jobs. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so learning all of that was a very interesting experience. I was a naive kid, you know what I mean? I was full of piss and vinegar, etc. and so on. And I had a great time. And I didn't really know what I was learning at the time. It wouldn't be until 25-ish years after that I would put two and two together and go, you know what? For a couple of years there, I lived as an anarchist. I didn't have any, I was outside of the state completely. I didn't have any identification whatsoever. I had a made-up name. You know what I mean? I didn't call myself my legitimate. It wasn't Captain Kickass. It was something, Bob Smith or whatever, right? I would sometimes I would do David Banner, right, as like an ode to the Incredible Hulk, or David Bennett, which was another one David Banner would use on the Incredible Hulk.
I would have been tempted to use Kwai Chang Kane, but they probably wouldn't believe that.
I was like Kane. I wandered the earth for a little while and just sort of figured life out. And so that, of course, gave me a unique perspective much later on when I decided to discover what I am politically, right? I found myself unemployed one day. I got laid off from a tech job, right? So I was collecting the socialist money, and I had the internet, right? The socialist money, for our listeners, is the unemployment, right?
Yeah.
So, but I had the internet, and I'm like, oh, I have plenty of time, and all my bills are paid. What will I do? I will search the internet for weird things. And so, I was like, you know what? I'm going to settle this thing in my head where like everybody's like, where do you fall politically? And like, I don't. I hate politics, right? Like they all smell like used car salesmen to me, even at that point. But I wanted to know. I'm like, okay, well, let me discover what is a Democrat, what is a Republican, right? From like a fresh perspective, right? I've never looked into any of this before because I just didn't care. So I'm like, what am I? And I would go and I'd watch and read, something about Democrats, and I'd be like, well, I like this, but that part that's not right. And I'd do the same for Republicans. I'd watch or read a thing. I'd be like, well, I like this part of that, but I don't like this part of that. My family was mostly like right-wing Republican types, right? As far as like growing up. So like there was a whole lot of like, anchor, don't collect welfare, and anchor babies suck, and this type of thing coming from the family tree anyway. That sort of had some influence. And if I had to declare myself anything prior to this moment where I'm trying to discover what I am, I would say that I was probably a constitutionalist, right? Because I'm like, oh well, the old guys wrote the paper, right? Like, can't you just abide by what the old guys wrote on the paper? You know, that was kind of my fallback for almost every political thing. Whenever I got myself into an argument or some sort of discussion about politics, I'd just be like, well, point to the paper that the old guys wrote. Did they say it was cool? If not, not cool. Did they say it was cool? All right, then it's cool.
The thing is, if it was treated that way, if government was actually limited by the Constitution, I don't think it would be a bad thing on the whole.
Yeah.
You know, the problem is that
they don't follow.
They never follow their own rules.
It's literally words on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
That's all that it is. And it was that realization that brought me to sort of be an anarchist thought, right, or libertarian, whatever you want to call it, like against the organization, the institutional organization known as the state. So I'm trying to discover what I am, and it turns out that whatever a Democrat is used to be what the Republicans were, and whatever Republican is turns out to be what the Democrats were, and they've sort of flipped the script on like their whole entire life philosophies. And I'm like, I can't join a team that can't even define its fucking self. You know what I mean? How can I say, like, I know people who are like, my daddy's a Republican, my mama's a Republican, and they raised me to be a good Republican, you know? But, like, I'm like, yeah, well, okay, but, like, you know, does that really jive? You know?
Are you talking about a Goldwater Republican or a George Bush Republican? Because there's a world of difference.
Right, and they flipped their ideology over the course of a couple of, you know, generations. So, like, if you're not consistent in what you do, how can you claim to be a thing? And these are questions I started asking in this discovery process.
Yeah, one of the things that's really struck me as a guy who grew up under Reagan was listening to Reagan give a speech in 1964 in support of Barry Goldwater.
Oh, wow.
That was an absolutely brilliant speech, and most of it I could agree with. And then, you know, he was such a horror.
He's a great actor.
Yeah, but the thing is, I think he was sincere. I think he was sincere, and he was conned into giving up the most important parts of his agenda so that he could pursue the least important parts. Which is unfortunate.
I don't know. I wasn't following politics at all. Like, I think the first time I remember politics was Jimmy Carter, peanut farmer. Right?
Yeah.
Like, there was something going on. It was during the gas crisis.
Yeah.
Right? When people were lined up around the block. I happened to be living in a place that was like near a gas station, and I saw the line. I used to go buy my cans of soda for 25 cents.
Yep.
You know.
And every time you turn on the TV, they're saying double-digit inflation and double-digit unemployment.
Right. And then one day, my can of soda was 50 cents. And I only had a quarter. I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Right? This is the first time inflation affected me as a person. I was, I don't know, 6, 7 years old, something, maybe. You know, I don't remember. But, you know, I was just like, balls, man. I didn't say balls at that age, but that's my feeling was. So, and then, you know, Reagan came along and, like, you know, I was watching Saturday Night Live a lot, so I got to, like, well, you know what Nancy says? If you can't beat them, nuke them. Right? You know, like, do a little, you know, Reagan impersonation. He loved saying, well, before everything. That was his shtick. Right? If he was James Hetfield, that'd be his, yeah.
Yeah. My favorite quote was from Reagan was when they made the movie Indecent Proposal, where Robert Redford pays $1 million to spend one night with the wife of Woody Harrelson, who was played by Demi Moore. Of course, all of these were actor names, not character names. But somebody asked Ronald Reagan what he would do if Robert Redford wanted to sleep with Nancy for $1 million, and Robert Reagan says, "Well, I'd try to help her raise the money."
Nice. Nice.
But yeah, that was. I think that's my favorite Reagan quote. But yeah, his speech in 1964 is really inspiring. And then he came into office and he did so many awful things.
Well, and I think it was like I had this fantasy in my head that this actually happened, but I think it was actually a Saturday Night Live skit where they had somebody impersonating Reagan, telling this insanely confusing speech about how trickle-down economics worked. Like, in my head, I was like, no, Ronald Reagan actually gave a speech on trickle-down economics. And somebody told me actually kind of recently that never happened. And I was like, really? I'm pretty sure it happened. And then it occurred to me that it might have been like a skit, you know?
As far as I know, there was never actually a theory called trickle-down economics, but that was just something.
Well, you see, if we print the money and then give it to all of our rich friends, they will spend the money on some things that the rest of the people in the industries work in, and therefore some of the money will trickle down and improve their lives.
All of which is actually true as far as it goes, but it only covers half the cycle. The other half of the cycle is that part of that money will trickle back down to the lowest paid of the workers, but all of the cost of the handout will be borne by the holders of currency, who are almost exclusively these same low-paid workers, because rich people don't own cash. They own stock and bonds and real estate and commodities.
They have assets.
Anything but dollars, because they know the dollar's going to shit and always has been.
When this phenomenon occurs, right, the Federal Reserve prints billions of dollars and they inject it into the economy. The first people to benefit from that money are, of course, the most wealthy and the most politically connected.
Yeah, and
so they derive
technically
the most
the first
value.
People to get it.
Right. They derive the most value. By the time it actually does, quote, trickle down, unquote, to, I don't know, you guys, me, whatever. Like, inflation has already kicked in, and you're seeing almost no benefit to the additional money having been printed. And then, of course, by the time it all settles itself, now whatever money you might have had in your savings, or maybe you own a little piece of land or whatever, is now worth less dollars as a result.
Right.
Because now there's more dollars in circulation. So, of course, that percentage just gets cut by however many dollars are printed.
Yeah, and the pernicious effects that it has on thinking are almost as bad because, you know, basically if the dollar is dropping in value, it becomes sensible to be habitually in debt.
Right.
Because you will pay back smaller dollars than you borrow.
Right. It also becomes sensible to, as soon as you earn the dollars and you retrieve what's left of your paycheck after the government gets done raping you for it, you take whatever dollars and put it into something that's going to hold its value.
Yes. That's
more
what
so
Ludwig
than the
von
dollar.
Mises called the flight to real value.
Right.
And that's a stage of inflation. That's like...
that's occurring right now.
Before hyperinflation. Yeah.
In the USA, that is occurring right now, in my opinion. And it has been occurring, well, since I've been alive. I remember in the late 1980s, there was television commercials for Mazda pickups, right? These little, four-banger pickup trucks, the tiny pickups, right? The ad was, sakes alive, only Mazda's got a truck for just $57.95. Can you imagine buying a brand new tiny, like a Toyota Tacoma or something? Not even a four-wheel drive, just a two-wheel drive, right? Four-banger, not a six, right? No towing package, nothing. For less than $6,000? That doesn't happen.
That would be nice. You'd be lucky to get one used for that price.
That vehicle's like 18, 20 grand without any options. You want options, you talk 20, 25, right? You know what I mean? So that is a direct result of inflation. The amount of dollars between, 1989 and 2020 has increased so much that a comparable pickup truck, which should be cheaper right? Just because technology has gotten better, they've gotten better manufacturing techniques, should be cheaper than it was back in 1989, is indeed more expensive by orders of magnitude and is only going to get more expensive. Thank you, Federal Reserve and government, for dumping all this fucking money into the system.
Yeah, I mean, that soda you mentioned, 25 cents. Most of the time I pay $2.50 for a soda now. That's 10 times. You know, maybe $2. That's still an 8-fold increase. Yeah. You know, but they're telling us inflation is only 1-2% a year.
Yeah, no, they're full of
Bullshit.
fucking shit. Inflation since yesterday, maybe.
Yeah, they exclude so much stuff from that inflation measure, and they change it to make the data say what they want it to say.
So for anybody listening, my advice, and I'm not a financial guru, I'm not an attorney, I'm not a banker, but my advice is when you earn your dollars, take some of it at least. You know, pay your bills, of course, be responsible. But, you know, if you're going to put something into savings, take a percentage of that, put it into something other than U.S. dollars. Put it into, I don't know, gold, silver, put it into, I don't know, guitars, something that's going to retain their value, possibly increase in value. You figure it out. You're the expert of your own life. You know your life best. You probably already know some of these things in your life that are going to increase in value over time. So, you know, maybe put it into that. Or, you know, if you like cryptocurrency, put it into that, you know. But if you're not familiar, well, either learn about it or go with what you know, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And also, you know, if you need to increase your earnings, you know, the street price of crypto is on the order of 10% greater than the exchange price of crypto. So buy crypto on exchanges, sell it on the streets. And that is, at least at the moment, a good way to make money. The downside of it is that the reason that 10% differential is maintained is because the banks are blockading the exchanges. Right. And they're doing that by closing the accounts of anybody who sends wires to the exchanges or otherwise sends money to the exchanges. I realize
it's a pain in the ass for anybody who's doing this, like as a way to, you know, gain extra income. Mm-hmm. However, it is beautiful in that the more banks do, the more governments do to combat cryptocurrency, the more they forward its progress.
Well, you may well be right on that.
Necessity is the mother of invention, right? Mm-hmm. What hasn't been
necessity is definitely a mother.
Well, what hasn't been improved upon in my lifetime, regular United States dollars. It's the same fucking shit it was in 1972, basically, right? Other than inflation.
Well, 1972, you still had silver quarters.
Okay.
So
if anything, money has gotten worse, right? They've gotten away from putting silver. Inflation has occurred. There's been no features. There's been no improvements. There's been no efficiency added. The only thing I can say as far as financially that has benefited my life is the advent of cash machines. that was a good invention. I enjoyed that one. Yeah. Right. But outside of that, that did me some good
until the advent of my being blacklisted from the banking system. And
but now, like, cryptocurrency is software. So, like, all that needs to happen is enough people need to feel the pain of the pinch, whatever pinch is going on, whether it's from the banks, it's from the government, it's from the market, whatever that pinch is, and then somebody will outcode it.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
Somebody will invent a way around it. They'll be like, oh, well, here we have this problem. I bet you I could write some code to circumvent that problem, and they'll eventually figure out how to do exactly that, as opposed to, because it is a market device. Cryptocurrency is probably the largest market device, or the greatest market device perhaps ever invented, in my opinion, right? It didn't ask permission to exist. It exists almost in defiance of any authority, right? If not in direct defiance of authority, right? But how did it come about? It came about as a result of the 2008 fucking market crash, right? Who caused that? The Federal Reserve and the U.S., the government, with their fucking policy, their economic policies, right?
Yeah, definitely true. And, they may actually, in the end, right now, the cartel the monopolists are managing to cause a lot of pain for crypto traders.
I mean,
but eventually what I expect to see is that every town will have 3 or 4 guys that you can buy or sell crypto from. Just like every town used to have 3 or 4 guys that you could buy or sell weed from.
Look a little
and those
further.
guys will be buying and selling dollars and weed from or dollars and coins from each other, and they'll be bypassing the exchanges completely, because they'll mostly be people who can't get to the exchanges anymore because they can't they can't bank anymore.
But now look a little further into the future, right? And I can say this because there's evidence for this, and it's called, I think you called Forkfest 2020 the flippening, right? At some point, right? There's something in the market called inversion when it comes to technology, right? You've seen this with the internet and telephony, or telephones, right? Telecommunications, if you will. So what happened is, first there was the telephone, right? And the telephone was just an analog medium broadcast over copper wire, right? With some, digits and maybe some, ladies behind some boards with some cords to plug in to connect your call to the next place where it needed to go, right? Eventually those ladies were all replaced with software, right? And then eventually the copper was all replaced with fiber optics, right? So now there's something called voice over IP, which just means that, you can still call people and talk to them live time and hear their voice, but all that traffic no longer travels over copper, and in fact, it travels over fiber optics, right? Ethernet, right? The internet, right?
And it travels encapsulated over
But what I'm
IP
saying
traffic.
is it started out as a completely analog platform, right? Telephony, right? Telephones, right? You had to actually dial the rotary phone, right? That's where dialing, the term, came from, for those of you under, 20 or whatever. And then there was an inversion, right? And the inversion was, all of a sudden, now the internet came on. The internet used to ride on the telephone network. You used to have a modem. You had to dial up. You had to connect, that annoying-ass fucking tone to connect, and then you were connected. Now you could pass data. Well, now it's the other way around. Right.
That's the physical inversion.
That's the inversion, right?
Yeah.
So what? And I can further illustrate the inversion by the fact that, when CDs came out compared to cassettes and albums, right? Vinyl records, they were crystal clear, right? The tones and everything. You were like, wow, I can really hear everything, right? The same thing happened with the internet. Once the engineers, the software developers, figured out how to transmit voice properly, it also became crystal fucking clear, right? I don't know if you remember the long distance wars, and Sprint used to, you could hear a pin drop, right? That was their big slogan in their commercials, right? For their long distance service, right? And it was so clear because we run over the fiber optics network, right? You could hear a pin drop, right? And so it's true. Digital voice transmission is far more clear than old analog over the copper transmission. The problem was that when people would have a conversation, if I called you over digital phone to a digital phone and we didn't say anything for a minute, people would be like, are you there? Hello? Right? Because they thought the call had been disconnected. They didn't hear anything. So something had to be invented, and it's called the comfort tone, right? And the comfort tone is just this. It's just a little bit of white noise in the very background of your digital to digital telephone calls now. Right? If you use an app to make a call, if you use a VoIP phone to make a call of any variety. In fact, most telephone traffic now travels over the internet in the entire globe. There's some remote areas where it still might travel over some analog lines. Some old motherfucker up in Berlin, New Hampshire might have an analog phone that he tries to dial, and it's like, for help, press 1, and he can't because it's an old rotary phone, right? But outside of that...
But of course, that's just the last mile. He'll have copper wire to his central office, but chances are his central office is talking to the network over IP.
Right. I say all of this to say that when it comes to state-based currency versus cryptocurrency, we are going to see an identical inversion. There is going to be a time very soon in our lifetime, I believe, where there's going to be an inversion, and now you might still have U.S. dollars, but it's going to be digitally. Maybe it's the what do we call the stable coins, right? Cash might still be around, but it'll be sort of antiquated as far as like an actual transaction. But USD will still exist for a while, but it's going to ride on top of cryptocurrency at some point in its life, just like telephone traffic now rides on top of the internet.
Yeah, I think that's probably a reasonable analysis. In USDT, USDC, there are Gemini Coin. I could probably, if I tried hard enough, name a dozen stable coins. Yeah. And stable coins may eventually be the answer to the banking crisis, where if you can't put your money in a bank, buy yourself a great big safe, put it in the basement, and just hoard that money and issue tokens against it. And when people want their cash, just be like, "Oh, thank God, give me some of my tokens back and get the shit out of my basement."
That's how banks originated. Right?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, Bob's got a safe basement he's got a steel door on it and pretty good locks, and somebody's always home and he's well armed. Well, let's just keep all our valuables at Bob's house for a small fee.
Yeah, and specifically that was in the very origination, Bob was probably a goldsmith, and so he had all that shit because he bought and he made jewelry. Okay, so he had to store lots of precious metal in his home, and so
you could get robbed all the time.
You could drop off your silver and gold shit at this jeweler's house, and he'd hold it for you, and then you could pass the claim check around with your friends as a token for that money. So that's exactly if anybody in the world should love stable coins, it's Peter fucking Schiff, because this is a stable coin is a warehouse receipt for money, and it can be a warehouse receipt for silver and gold, which means if they get adopted widely, people are going to have that much more need and desire to hold gold and silver, because they won't have to count on some bullshit market price that nobody can buy silver and gold at, and that could revitalize the use of gold and silver as money. Is the short form of that. So Peter Schiff should be coming in his pants every time he reads an article about fucking stable coins. I hope you're listening, Peter, and thank you, because you helped convert me, bro. Now it's my turn.
The first time I heard stablecoin, I'm like, is this for like horse riders? Stablecoin?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Okay, not funny. All right.
Captain Dad.
Hey, I got my jokes aren't dad jokes. They just are to some people.
Right.
Because I'm old.
Well, yeah, it happens. It happens to the best of us.
Why, there used to be a time
enough not to die.
There used to be a time when people were offended by things like Andrew Dice Clay.
So
now you're just like, really? This guy made millions in it? Like, if it's like going back and watching an episode of the A-Team now. When you were a kid, you were like, oh my God, the A-Team is great. They just shoot things up. They drive around in a kick-ass van. There's a large black man with a mohawk. He wears gold chains, and it's amazing, right?
Yeah.
And then you go back and you watch it when you're like 40, and you're like, wow, really? I got enthused about this.
For people,
this was the pinnacle of my watching experience at this point in my life.
For people who don't remember Alexander Dice Clay, he would say things like, so I got my tongue up this chick's ass, and she's giving me an attitude like, who the hell are you? And I'm like, lady, it gets boring standing here in line at the bank.
Yeah, he was, before there were shock jocks, there were shock comics, or at least maybe around the same time. And he was certainly one of them. But I actually give Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy all the credit for spawning somebody like Andrew Dice Clay and all the other shock comics, because they really pushed the limit, right? They offended. Their whole shtick was just to be offensive. I remember going back and watching before some of his bigger videotaped, if you will, shows. Some Eddie Murphy stand-up from when he did like club tours and stuff. And it wasn't funny at all. It was just offensive. Right?
Yeah.
His whole routine, it was just like, I'm trying to offend the audience as much as I can. And some people were like, and other people were like, ha, 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 with the applause, right? So you could tell that there was a cultural shift in what was acceptable in comedy at that point in space and time. It was interesting to witness.
And that's the thing. One of the things that's always funny is whatever pushes the edge.
Right.
Whatever pushes the limits. And, you listen to a lot of, I love Lenny Bruce, for his life story,
yes,
more than the actual content of his comedy, which in the latter half, he got some great rips on the Catholic Church before it was cool.
If anybody any of our listeners are a George Carlin fan, and you're looking for the next George Carlin, you're probably not going to find it. But what you can find is the previous George Carlin, which is Lenny Bruce.
Yeah, he was a funny guy. I heard his name because the co-op system in Ann Arbor has the Lenny Bruce co-op, because he was not only all of their co-ops are named after activists, and he was not only a comedian, but he was really an activist in that he got repeatedly arrested for doing his shtick,
doing comedy,
and he kept fucking doing it. And in the end, he was literally, his act was reading his court documents aloud to the audience and making them funny. Kind of like how Ian would read maybe a statement by police with the tones of voice.
Just to illustrate Lenny Bruce's effect on modern comedy, Doug Stanhope has a new special out. And his opening bit is he pulls out, a folded up piece of paper out of his pocket, and he reads an official apology for the show he's about to give. So instead of giving the apology after the show and people are all enraged about it, he apologizes in advance for the show that he's about to give, and it's hilarious, man.
If we spirits have offended, think but this, and all is mended, that you have but slumbered here while he is dighting. Something or other did appear. Oh, well.
Lenny Bruce was definitely an activist in that he would get arrested for doing comedy.
Yeah.
And
there's shit you couldn't say. You couldn't badmouth the Catholic Church.
And he did, repeatedly.
And think about how many sexual assaults were fostered by that attitude. You can't talk bad about the Catholic Church.
I don't know where I was. I saw a television commercial that's one of these attorney ambulance chaser type commercials where it's like, have you been molested by the Catholic Church? Call the law offices of Bob, Dave, and Doug, or whatever, right? You know what I mean?
Bob and Doug McKenzie?
Whatever it was, call the law offices of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe.
Yeah.
Or whatever it was. But I was like, no way. There's some sort of almost class action suit type thing against the Catholic Church for violating children? This is insane. I've never heard of such a thing.
Well, no, but if you were a victim of this, don't go with the class action. It's always a losing move. Get your own lawyer, make your own peace.
You're free to seek justice.
You're going to make more money. This is not legal advice because nobody knows what the fuck he's talking about.
So, nobody. I saw a sign next to your sign. It seems as if there's some political races heating up.
Indeed.
Here in the Shire.
Indeed.
What's the status of your campaign?
The status of my campaign is it goes on. I continue to be a candidate for governor. And I encourage you that if you see anything on your ballot that nobody should do, even if you're not in New Hampshire, go ahead and write nobody in. If you elect nobody to all the jobs, then nobody will do them. Nobody will have time to do them. Ain't nobody got time for that.
There's plenty of government jobs that nobody should be doing.
So elect nobody for everything. But especially, I hope you'll show up for the Republican primary in New Hampshire. Move here if you have to. We're down. We've got room for you. And vote for me against Mr. Sununu.
When is that?
When is that? September 7th? 8th.
If you get here on the 7th, you can party and then go ahead and vote on the 8th.
It's true, and you will be able to vote on the 8th if you get here on the 7th. You can register on the spot to vote. The only thing is, if you're registered as a Democrat now, maybe you voted for Vermin Supreme last time you voted in the Democratic primary, then you're going to want to unregister yourself before Election Day to make sure you get your choice of ballots, or re-register as a Republican, in which case you'll automatically get the Republican
What a
ballot.
shitty system. You mean I can't just show up as Bob Smith and be like, I want to vote for this guy? I have to like declare a fucking party first?
Well, the thing is, you're voting in a party primary in this vote. That's the September 7th vote. So you're choosing who will be the Republican offering for governor. And it's a three-way race. Then, if nobody wins the Republican nomination, then I will run against Daryl for the Libertarian, or somebody for the Democrats.
Right.
So this is the first stage that I'm in right now. But if I don't get past the first stage, then I won't be there in the general.
Well, you're right. It is a shitty system.
Fucking sucks.
Oh, yeah.
It's ridiculous and stupid, and there's all these rules. But nobody is correct in that if somebody were to move here on the 7th, they would be able to go and register.
I've never heard of that in another state.
Yeah, there's very few states that have
to the Shire.
Very few of them. I'm not sure how many have it, but some small number have.
I've never
same
heard
day.
of it, and that's pretty amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the thing is, what he's saying, though, is if you're registered as a Democrat now in New Hampshire, you have to go to either undeclared or become a Republican. Better to just be undeclared, because then you have more flexibility. If you're undeclared, that means that you can just show up and declare yourself as a certain party that one day, and then you can undeclare again on the way out of the building.
Yeah, I didn't register as a Republican until just before I decided to seek office as a Republican, because, the truth is I'm no fan of the Republican Party.
Right.
I'm a fan of some of what they claimed to stand for, but they haven't really stood for that shit, except rhetorically. I mean, they can have the Senate, the Congress, and the presidency, and they don't repeal a single gun law.
Just for anybody who's listening, and they're going, well, doesn't that make nobody a statist? Well, in my mind, it makes you an activist, right? Because you are at the very least, spreading the message of freedom and liberty by doing it, by playing the stupid games to win the stupid prizes.
Yeah, well, I figure, that I can't make the job not exist.
Right.
But the closest I can come to that is make sure nobody does it.
Right. And then perhaps make some of the jobs go away. Right, or at least have some impact of some kind, right?
And I'll tell you, you want to get me to come to work? As governor, you pass a law that reduces the size and scope of government. I'll stop smoking weed long enough to smoke that bitch, or just stay sober enough to be able to sign my name. That's not too hard. I just use a peace sign, or an anarchy sign, depending on my mood.
Thank you for doing what you do.
Well, thank you for. That was actually a great story. I really enjoyed it, and it's so different from what people think of stereotypically as what libertarians are about.
Yeah.
And to me, it's so much what we're about. I mean, one of the things that helped me become an anarchist was realizing that the most fair market I ever operated in was Shakedown Street at a Grateful Dead show.
Black market.
And it was the place where nothing was regulated by the government.
Right.
But everything worked out fine because, if somebody showed up and they were willing to do something, somebody else needed that thing done, you know.
Yep.
And so it was, I had the urchin introduction to libertarianism as opposed to, maybe the Ayn Rand introduction that, more classically successful kids might have gotten to libertarianism.
So I happened to hit the internet, right as sort of everybody was getting going on the internet, right? The original bloggers and the YouTubers, right, who are beginning to make some money at doing their thing. And this was about when I was, sort of trying to discover what party did I belong to, right? And it turns out I didn't belong to any, and I found all sorts of things. I'd find some like Democratic, podcasts or, YouTube videos or whatever. I'd find some Republican ones, and then, I'd find like Alex Jones and be like, well, some of that's okay. And like some of his guests that he had on were like old Stefan Molyneux, right? Pre-cancer, right? When he was talking about, how to be free and, anarchism and stuff. And so I got to know like the story of your enslavement and stuff like that through him. I also got to know a video from Jacob Spinney called "The State Is Not Great," which talks about the non-aggression principle, and it talks about how the state is basically a scam to rape you for your life's value, your effort, right? And it was a great video. And then also discovered Free Talk Live, right? Around that time. And
this was what time?
Probably 2008 Ron Paul era.
Okay.
Right? Thereabouts.
And so you were turned on to Ron Paul the first time around?
So the election had passed, but like all of the mania still existed. Right? All of the videos. And so I got to watch, and I'm like, oh, wow. And ironically, when I was growing up in Wisconsin, one day there was a issue of the Chicago Tribune sitting on like the kitchen table as I was, I don't know, getting ready to leave for somewhere. And it was opened up to like the political section, and there was just one little picture of this guy, and it said Ron Paul, the Libertarian Party, who just wants to blah, 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 blah. I don't remember.
So this would have been 1988.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what it said, but I was like, well, that's the most sense I've ever heard come out of any politician. And that was it. That's all I remember, right? I just remember going, oh, that guy made sense more so than any other politician I've ever heard. And so fast forward to 2008 or whatever, and I was like, oh, fucking Ron Paul. He was the guy that they mentioned in the little tiny article they tried to bury at the bottom of the Chicago Tribune back in the day. And so, the non-aggression principle played into that. Sound money economics, right? Anarcho-capitalism, if you will, right? Real money, right? As opposed to, learning what fiat money is, learning what do they call it? The 10% fractional reserve banking, learning how that works. You're like,
the 10% is gone, I hear.
I've been told that
they've eliminated it.
It's the no
0%.
Reserve. It's the no limit reserve banking system at this point. The banks can just create money out of thin air without even having to have anything to back it up.
But I'll tell you what's getting hard is getting them to physically cough that shit up.
Oh, yeah.
They want to move money around their system, but they don't want to let money escape their system. And, my recent experiences with Bank of America and with Chase Bank make me think that they're really scrounging for actual currency.
In conclusion, I just wanted to say that I did discover politically what I was, and I was nothing. And the Violent Femmes actually have a song called "Nothing," and it says, "Are you a Democrat, or are you a Republican or a Democrat, a liberal, a fascist? I don't give a crap because I'm nothing, and I'm not proud because being nothing, it's not allowed."
Yeah. See, I won't say I'm nothing. I'm a libertarian, which is definitely something. It's I
feel like libertarian is another label for anarchist.
Is a man who says that government governs best, which governs least, and an anarchist is one who takes that to its logical conclusion and says, therefore, that government which governs the best possibly is that which governs not at all.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the highest authority is the individual. Again, I keep saying, people are like, Captain Kickass, what are you the captain of? I'm the captain of myself. And if there's any lesson for the rest of the world to take away from me, and that is be the captain of yourself. You are the highest authority. There is nobody, not you, nobody, there is no other human being on the face of the planet better able to make decisions for you than you.
Yep.
And thus, you should make all of the decisions for yourself.
Because nobody knows how to live your life better than you do, and nobody deserves that kind of power.
I think we should cut it at this point, boys. I've got a nice outro here. World premiere from the concert, FUD.
Oh, no.
At Fork Fest.
Oh, nice.
Oh, this should be interesting.
See, I meant to ask
video.
you about music, but your origin story was super cool.
Well, he played a great show at Fork Fest this year.
Thanks for having me on, nobody.
Hey,
Aria.
thanks for coming. It was a good time.
And we're heading to Nightcap here shortly in Keene.
Yeah, gotta go out and drink on the street. Breaking the law, breaking the law.
As a unit, and of course that means we had limited time for writing, but we did manage to write an all-original song. That song is called, what is it called? That Song? Yeah? Okay. You ready?